Good morning, Deputy Mayor, Councillors, CEO, Directors, ladies and gentlemen. When we come together as a community, it's important that we recognise the fact that this wonderful place we call home has seen a human occupation dating back around 60,000 years, and in our region, mainly represented by the Iwi people. So when we're together as a council and as a community, we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and those emerging. So this council meeting is being streamed live. Welcome to our online audience. It's being recorded and published in accordance with the council's standing orders. By the members of the public gallery today, by being here, you are consenting to your vision and your voice, if you speak, being recorded and published. I'm also required to tell you that you may be subject to legal action if your actions or comments are deemed inappropriate or unacceptable today. I'm sure they won't be. So thank you very much. I declare the meeting open. And today we've got Very Reverend Andrew Hogan here today to lead us in prayer. Thanks very much.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Gracious God, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help these elected officials engage in meaningful discussion. Allow them to be united so that they might foster the bonds of community. Fill them with your grace, Lord God, as they make decisions that might affect the members of this community, and continue to remind us that all that we do today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Appreciate it. There's nobody else on council business. Councillor Christensen is joining us online today, and it's been previously approved. Welcome, Councillor. I trust you can hear us.
I can hear you loud and clear, Your Worship.
Thanks very much, Councillor Christensen. So apologies today. We have some condolences to offer. Councillor Corrigan.
Thank you, Your Worship. This morning I'd like to extend heartfelt condolences to three remarkable women in the Australian South Sea Islander community: Auntie Winifred Bower, Auntie Tessa Farmer, and Auntie Gay Miller. These esteemed elders were influential figures within their communities, leaving a positive impact not only on the Australian South Sea Islander community, but also on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Auntie Winifred Bower played a pivotal role as an elder in the establishment of the Australian South Sea Islander Hut Precinct in Mackay, constructed by the Mackay City Council in 1993, a beloved gathering place for both the Australian South Sea Islander community and visitors to our region. Her efforts were, along with other elders in the Mackay Australian South Sea Islander community, were instrumental in Queensland formally recognising the Australian South Sea Islander community as a distinct cultural group in Australia in the year 2000. All three of these women have left behind an enduring legacy characterised by their determination and resilience in overcoming significant challenges. Their stories serve as a profound inspiration, not only to me, but also to those who had the privilege of knowing them in our community.
Thanks, Councillor Corrigan. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, Worship. I ask you for indulgence. I know we generally recognise members of our own local community, but on this occasion I would like to acknowledge Councillor Neil Fisher from the Rockhampton Regional Council. Neil was one of Rockhampton's longest serving councillors, serving over many portfolios and roles during his terms. He was first elected to Rockhampton City Council in 2000, and then again with the Rockhampton Regional Council, the Amalgamated Council, from 2012, and was re-elected again in 2016, 2020 and 2024. The period 2020, which was the first time that I was elected, Neil served as the Deputy Mayor in Rockhampton, and I was elected to represent Mackay Regional Council on the Law Mat Committee, which was our Waste Management Action Committee. Neil was a pivotal part of that committee and had significant input onto our regional waste management plans and within the waste services industry across all of regional Queensland. So I just felt it was significant to recognise Neil for his contribution, not only to Rockhampton, but as two regional councils across Queensland in his role as a councillor. He was also very well known for his passion for the environment. His family owns nurseries, and I myself was dragged into standing with Neil at his little gardening shows that he had on Channel 7 whenever he was in Mackay. He used our botanic gardens and our local gardens for his little gardening show, and learned there many things about, even though Mackay has Mount Blackwood holly, which is endemic to our region, which I did not know before I met Neil. So I just wanted to pay tribute to Neil and offer condolences to his family and Rockhampton Council.
Thank you, we'll certainly do that. Thanks very much, Councillor Hassan. Are there further condolences? No further condolences? Thanks, councillors. Any conflicts of interest to declare today? None, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 26th of June have been circulated. Would somebody like to move that be adopted? Councillor Jones moves, seconded by Councillor Mackay. Those in favour? There's a bit of a delay, I've got to remember that, Councillor Christensen. Okay, thanks very much. That's unanimously adopted, thank you. The business arising out of that at item 8 on your agenda, councillors. There's no questions for that, we'll move on. The Mayoral Minutes, there's no Mayoral Minutes today. The consideration of committee reports. First of all, under 10.1, the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee report, are there any questions on the Audit Committee? No questions? Somebody like to move? Councillor Bella moves. I'd like to second that. Councillor Bella?
Just quickly, this is our first, we've now undertaken as our external auditors to use the Queensland Audit Office. They're generally pretty happy with the maturity of our systems and where we're going. A couple of things of note, the employee survey, their engagement survey, we're moving towards a shorter period, which I think is far more effective, which I think will help. And overall, it was very pleasing. The other thing actually was the IT report, which is always very important, as we've seen with, admittedly, the problem we've had worldwide was a glitch rather than an attack. But continuing discussions on AI and how it can help and the risks it poses to us. That's a bit of a watching brief at this point, so where that ends up, I don't know.
Thanks, Councillor Bella. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Certainly keeps us on our toes now to have the Queensland Audit Office sitting at our table at our audit meetings. So it's very good to see. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence and officers' report. My report is at 11.1.1. Any questions? Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 19, you mentioned that you had a meeting with Patricia O'Callaghan, the CEO of TEQ. I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Certainly. There's been a fair amount of conjecture around the RTOs, the Regional Tourist Organisations of Queensland, about a potential defunding or a rearrangement of funding by particularly Tourism Events Queensland. There's even been some political news about the funding that goes to Tourism Events Queensland. So we've been hearing a lot of conjecture. So the CEO and I decided that we needed to go and get it from the horse's mouth. So we talked to, with due respect to Patricia, we talked to Patricia, and indeed there will be a review of RTOs in Queensland and tourism funding. We just didn't want to be left out of that because the major review is going to be certainly centred around the 5 major tourism areas of Queensland: Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Whitsundays and Cairns. We certainly, Mackay Isaac's area didn't want to be left out of that, so we got a commitment from the CEO of TEQ that they would include Mackay Isaac's in the brief for the consultancy's review of this whole thing that starts at the end of this year.
It's a good result. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions? Other questions? I'd like to move that my report be adopted. Somebody give a second. Councillor Hassan. Any other speakers? I'll put that back. Yes, Councillor Hassan.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Worship. I just wanted to mention the Fox Loopaflow mountain bike event that was held at the mountain bike trails. That was our first official event since the trails have been opened. And I just thought it was a great opportunity to note that we had over 300 riders registered for that event. Fantastic involvement, and over 240 of those riders were from outside of the Mackay region, so it was really important to note that and just demonstrate to the community the importance of this project to our region and acknowledge everyone who's been involved in the project today.
Thank you. It was a great morning. We were actually in the clouds when we opened it at 7:30 on that Saturday morning. It was drizzling and very muddy, but they loved it. It was fantastic. All right, I'll put the motion then. If there's no other speakers, those in favour? Any against? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. The CEO's report is the next one. Other questions on the CEO's report? Well, let me get the CEO to speak to it first of all.
Thanks, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors. June, as always, is a busy month for Cross Council. We've got the Mackay show, the end of financial year, and hosting a consular delegation. I'll leave the report for the Chamber, but do just want to take the moment just to say thank you to all of our staff that throughout the last financial year, during extremely challenging times, be that through labour or work demand or otherwise, tirelessly pursue the outcomes that we need for our community. So I'll leave the report to the Chamber, but acknowledge the staff of Council.
Thank you, CEO. There are a couple of hands go up for questions. Councillor Johnson.
My question just referred to page 31 under the key workforce initiatives, specifically the last dot point. Are you able to provide a brief description on what the workforce planning process looks like?
CEO.
So at the moment, there's work going on with our people and culture team, in particular what the future of that structure needs to look like to better enable a more business partnering approach so that we can work into the actual programs to determine what is the critical skills analysis, what do we need, how do we need, and then identify the gaps from there. So it's a piece of work that's just in the making at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councillor May.
Just in the workplace health and safety part of the report there, we see that there's 16 actions materialised from the investigations completed on a safety incident. I was just wondering if you could enlighten us as to what that safety incident was.
CEO.
That particular incident, Director.
I can circulate the information with your permission, Sir.
Okay, cool.
You might notice.
Yeah, I'll take it. What the action is. There might be some sensitive information.
Yep, no problem.
That's all.
Certainly. Further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Jones moves, second by Councillor Ballard. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Worship. The CEO's monthly report, there's several items I think that are worthy to note. On page 27, the after agent surveys that have captured the feedback from our residents when they call our customer service team. This last month's topic has been about waste, and waste is one of our core businesses. So it was really great to see that 81% of people have reported their satisfaction for the services that are provided. I also note our natural environment team have been extremely busy propagating over 5,000 plants from seed harvested from local stock for the Horizon company to plant in the Kamala area, and these were all delivered last month, so well done to the team. That's a great effort. The jewel in the crown is certainly a worthy comment that's made to me about the users of the memorial pool. Council is responsible for a lot of facilities, and yes, we tend to work out because it makes financial sense to do so. But the memorial pool, for me, has certainly come into its own. How lucky we have local operators that care about a grand old facility that has stood the test of time and keeps her looking her best at all the time. I know that the community are extremely grateful. As Councillor Johnson just mentioned, the workforce initiatives, Safe Talk being one of them. Mental health and wellbeing of our staff is essential for the overall happiness and productivity and success of our teams. Safe Talk training is great for awareness raising, and we had 17 staff put through their training last month. We all know about work-life balance. It's important, and taking care of our staff is ultimately benefits both the individual and the organisation. And lastly, Your Worship, I'd like to mention our health and regulatory services area, which is where our animal registrations occur. Our registrations are up for the month, which is fabulous. Thank you to all the members of the public that have registered their animals. Responsible pet ownership is the responsibility of the owner, and every time our officers have to go out and pick up a roaming animal, obviously, ultimately, it's the ratepayers of Mackay that have to pay for it. So here is my shout out on the live stream. If there are any members in the public out there watching, please encourage yourself or your neighbours to register their pets and make sure they have a fence to keep them in their yard. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Speaker against. Any other speakers? Councillor Ballard speaking for.
I just wanted to pull out one area there, our staff contingent. We still run at about 10% vacancies. The troubling thing from my point of view is it puts extra load on the staff that we do have, and ultimately they've stepped up, I believe, very well, but it's been for a sustained period of time, and there's always that concern about added load for a long period wears people down and their effectiveness can decline. So I think in this economic climate, it's very difficult to fix. Our turnover remains pretty constant. I think it's better than it is in a couple of other councils where I've got friends serving. The one very bright spot from my point of view is in June. We advertised 29 positions, and we actually had 28 positions filled. That to me is an indicator that things may well be on the turn a little bit. I indeed hope so, not only for our benefit and for the residents' benefit, but also for our staff's point of view.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ballard. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackay. You're speaking for, I take it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just wanted to further acknowledge our CEO's comment he raised about the consular visit that we had. And I just wanted to congratulate Tiona and her team for meeting a really awesome challenge that was set by our mayor to have a unique dining experience for our consular visit. And we got to dine in the 5th lane. So I want to give a shout out also to the Sugar Shed who provided the catering of the drinks, and also to the Grazing Goat. They really stepped up and provided an awesome meal in the laneway. I just want to really acknowledge them. And also the Memorial Pool, getting great positive feedback from the community. So I'd like to congratulate DMR Leisure on their management there at the facility.
Thanks, Councillor Mackay. Are there any other speakers? No other speakers. I'll put the motion then. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.1.4. 11.1.3 first of all. The Mayor and CEO attendance of the 2024 Mackay Citizens Tour to Mount Sura. Obviously it's unusual to take the CEO, but when we went in 2019, which was the last official visit we had for our visits to Mount Sura, this is a sister city relationship that's well over 30 years now. It's struggled a little bit in its 30th iteration, and when we were there in 2019, the Mayor, who's since been re-elected as well, the Mayor and I decided that the only way we can actually keep this going is to do either a council-to-council relationship in terms of maybe exchanging, as we used to do in the early days of this relationship with Mount Sura, or inspire some business-to-business relationships. So in that respect, the Mayor has been very interested to have our council's official position, and I can't speak for council unless it's a motion of council around this table. So that's the reason why I've elected to take the CEO with your approval. So are there questions around that? Councillor May?
Will there be meetings arranged for the CEO to interact with the council? Because I know from our visit in 2019, there wasn't much time in the schedule for, out of business sort of meetings or anything with such a tight schedule in the actual activities that are already planned.
Yes, there certainly will be. You won't be doing the tourism activities. No, there certainly will be, and that's the idea. So just to maintain this relationship, I think we've really got to put some effort from both sides into upping the ante in terms of not just a community-to-community relationship. It started off as a business-to-business relationship back in the early 90s, and that was why it came into being. If this is to continue, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade actually think it's a very, very wise thing to make it continue, then we've got to add some operational support to it. Are there any questions? Councillor Johnson, you got a question?
Yeah, sorry, I know you touched on previously about the CEO visiting, but has the CEO previously, any CEO, gone to the Matsura City trip prior to now, or?
Well, not to my knowledge, but certainly in the initial instance when it was all being signed, it was very, very operationally driven.
There was one, Your Worship.
There was one? Yeah, it was probably not my time.
It was Ken Goldthorpe.
Okay. Right. Further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Hassan, seconded by Councillor Jones. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, Worship.
No, I think it is important to continue these relationships, and as you said, this is a long-standing one. We recently hosted the consular delegates, and one of those delegates was from Japan, and they also expressed interest in having the CEOs there, so very supportive of both yourself and the CEO attending that trip. The cost is not overly significant, and I believe it provides value for money for our council. And I also believe that there are still positions available for members of the community to also attend this trip if they wish to.
Absolutely. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Councillor Johnson, voting against? Mate, sorry, and Councillor Mackay, sorry. Need to put your hands up so I can see them. Thank you. The motion's carried. 9-2, thank you. Motions to the 2024 LGAQ Annual Conference. So we've had briefings about this, councillors. So the motions that we're proposing to put forward to the LGAQ conference, which have got to be submitted shortly. One's about the local government asset appreciation. Two's about local government's implementation of the REEF 2050 long-term sustainability plan. Three's the Queensland government funding for local governments. That's implementing the REEF 2050 long-term plan. 4 is the federal government funding for Australian classification board processes. And 5 is insurance premiums for North Queensland. Any questions? No questions. Somebody like to move? Councillor Jones moves. Seconded by Councillor May. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Worship. The one that is pertinent, I think, for everybody in the community is certainly the one around the insurance costs within our region. And while I'm supportive of all of the motions that we're putting forward, this one in particular has a direct impact to our community across the board. So, you know, we're asking that reductions in premiums are necessary for the community. We live above Tropic of Capricorn. We're asking that those reductions occur predominantly in Queensland, especially for us, because we're in the cyclone affected area. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Speaker against? Any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to organisational capability and risk. And 11.2.1, the adoption of council policies. Presented for us today are 4 policies. Policy number 100, corrupt conduct complaints against the CEO. Number 31, our grants policy. Number 35, our non-current assets policy. And number 40, our water restrictions policy. Any questions? No questions? Would somebody like to move the policy adoptions as put forward to us today? Councillor Bella, seconded by Councillor Jones. Councillor Bella.
Quite simply, policies are the rule book that council operates by. It also allows staff to follow the intention of elected members, and thus, from our point of view, or from my point of view, reviewing of these policies done in a timely manner keeps them current. Anything that's been gone for a period of time with the changes in economies and various other things like that, if they're not current, they are ineffective. So from my point of view, I think policies also ensure equity of decision making across not only the community, but longitudinally along the term of government.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Speaker against? Any other speakers? For the adoption of those 4 policies, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, 11.3 is the community services area. We have nothing there. 11.4, the planning, growth and sustainability. So 11.4.1, facilitating development in the Mackay region policy. This is an MCU for multiple dwellings, 14 units at 65 Shakespeare Street in East Mackay. It's really a straightforward report. Director, is there anything else on that?
No, thank you, Worship. I think it is fairly straightforward, and it's good to see some more of this type of development coming through, and it fits within the scope of the policy and therefore recommended for approval.
Absolutely. Here to more like this. Are there any questions? No questions? Would somebody like to move? Then the report's adoption. Councillor May moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Councillor May.
This is a great, I think if we can get these units on the ground would be very beneficial, and the adopting of the facilitating development policy is designed just for that, to encourage this sort of development. We pull that out, we categorised it, we highlighted it. This is what we wanted to see happen, so I'm more than happy to support it.
Thank you very much. Speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. 11.5 now, infrastructure and operations. 11.5.1, a response to a petition from the IMEO Surf Lifesaving Club. We've actually got the president of the IMEO Surf Lifesaving Club registered to speak to this item today. So, Cynthia, all right, okay, over to that. Thanks very much for being here. The rules of engagement are, I mean, this is not a two-way debate, it's just 3 minutes for you to be able to put your case to the council. Thanks very much.
No problems. Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Cynthia Hegarty. I'm the president of the IMEO Surf Lifesaving Club. The IMEO Surf Lifesaving Club have been the guardians at IMEO Beach since 2001, where we patrol and run our junior activities. Our volunteers put in over 2,400 volunteer hours a year. So just into context, that's sort of what we're putting in. Now, we don't put petitions up lightly because this is volunteer time. It's not done by someone who's paid. The issue we have right now is we have a very small car park that intersects between our clubhouse and the beach. We do not have any direct beach access from our clubhouse down to the beach. So on a Nippers Day, we have to have our kids walk through the car park. There is a very small piece of grass and we have tried to attempt to use that as a designated walkway. As you can imagine, 100 kids with nipper boards, other siblings and volunteers trying to get them to walk down a little piece of grass is not possible. Unfortunately, in the last 5 years, we believe we've had almost 4 near misses between vehicles reversing out and kids. Now, we have put in a number of controls. We put signage up. We have had parents stand there as their job to make sure no vehicles are moving whilst we've got kids. Unfortunately, none of these are engineering controls. We're all in an industry that predominantly around here runs in mining, so we all understand hierarchy of control. We do not believe an administrative control will deal with this. We need an engineering control. Now, what we have proposed is the Surf Club is prepared to fund this, so we're not asking for council or the ratepayers to pay for this service to be installed. We would like to put in a boom gate, and we're not talking about a traditional boom gate like that. There's many that you can just pull across that sort of compact up. And we would like to be able to install the boom gate at the entrance of the car park. There are only 5 car parks in there, so we can also understand that potentially why this petition isn't seen favourably is because IMEO does have restricted parking. We believe by putting the boom gate in won't actually impact the parking imprint because our members who come in to run these activities can put their cars in advance. Sorry, I've had a cold. So that we do not believe that by putting the boom gate in, it will have any adverse impact on the parking in the region. What we are requesting is that we are allowed to use the boom gate so that when we do run junior activities, we pull across at the start of the session and the access to that car park is restricted. We have put witches' huts in there over the last 12 months because after the near miss of the hippie camper running over the child, we had a number of parents raising significant concern over the environment that we have the kids in. Unfortunately, people still drive over those witches' hats, and we have probably written off about 6 in the past 6 months, which is probably not a very good indication. The issue we have is kids don't read signage either. We're talking small children. If any of you've got kids that are 3 or 4 year olds, you know the last thing they're going to do is look at a sign that says, please stop, look for reversing vehicles.
Thanks.
That's right.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Okay, well, the response, what we ask the officers to do, the officers' response is there. Councillors, any questions? Councillor
Just one, I wasn't made aware through the report that the IMEO Surf Club were willing to fund the boom gate. I don't believe that that's been highlighted to us before. I was just wondering, had that been relayed to the council prior, or is that something that's just come up?
So, yeah. Director, please.
Yeah, through your worship, I'm only been made aware of that. I'm not sure if there's been previous conversation with staff that's.
Okay.
It was in the original petition we submitted. Sorry.
Thank you.
I think the issue relates to, it's a public car park asset. So if a decision is to be made to enhance a public car park, then that rule would then apply for any public car park, is the premise.
All right, Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, my initial question was the same as Councillor May's. but and I was aware, having seen the original correspondence, that the club did state that they would be willing to pay for the effects there. So I guess there's two questions that I have. One is, how is the statement then justified in the report that the cost and frequency of use does not represent value for money when the club, has clearly outlined that they're willing to pay for it? But the second question is, this has dragged on for some time. How come it's taken so long for this matter to come to council? So they're my two questions.
Okay, CEO, Director.
Yep, through your worship. So initially on the timing, I think that's been a couple of issues where we probably transitioned to a new arrangement in the reporting structure, and we've had some changeover in executive managers, and we've probably lost that in as a priority. So I acknowledge that there should have been a quicker response coming back in relation to the petition. So that falls on officers not managing that process appropriately. So certainly something we've had discussions about, making sure that any action coming out of future council meeting will be able to register accountability around corresponding back in the appropriate time frame. The second matter was, sorry, Councillor Christian, what was that one again?
Value, the statement about value for money, how that's justified in the report.
Yeah, I think the issue is a little bit the depending on where you would have to put the boom gate in, probably sits in road reserve, and then obviously the car park is actually freehold. So they're both separate parcels of land that sit outside the lease area for IMEO Surf Lifesaving Club. So normally we wouldn't have private infrastructure going into those events, even though the offer has been there. So normally that would be council infrastructure that goes into the road reserve or any of our freehold land. So that was probably where that came from, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Bella.
I have a number of questions. Firstly, has it been highlighted whether the car park would be filled and then the boom closed, or would it be left vacant?
Do we know that?
Pretty worse, my assumption would be to be closed at the start of the day and not use the parking, which is the intent, so restrict parking actually getting in there, because obviously you wouldn't want to have vehicles in there and close the boom gate and not being able to get them out.
The next question is, what would prompt or what process do we go through, or would be gone through, for a decision to close the boom gates? Would it be something that happens every weekend? Would it be something that we've got to be notified by? Because ultimately, we do need to advise the public of the fact, forewarn them of the fact that there will be changed parking conditions in IMEO. I know it's only 5 parks, but we've already got a tight situation. So how do we work permitting, all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, through your worship. So in this case, where it's particularly around the nipper days, we would have dates and times. So you would have to license those dates and times. So you would actually create a license that gives you the timing around when that boom gate could be closed or not. If there were other events that were outside of those license dates, it would be a separate application process that have that closed.
Okay. Further questions, Councillor Paddy?
Just on the back of Councillor Bella, listening to the statement, I kind of get the idea that the car parks possibly will be filled, but by, the volunteers, if you will, coming down early morning, setting up, closing it across. I mean, there's probably 4 or 5 volunteers there utilising those car parks at the crack of dawn. Not that I'm involved with nippers, so I apologise if I'm wrong. But yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay, Councillor Sheedy.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It just seems to me that this is something that can be entirely managed with a management plan with the Lifesaving Club and the council sort of coming together and agreeing terms and a licence as the directors indicated.
Thanks, Councillor Bella, you have another question?
Following Councillor Payton's comment, if there are going to be vehicles in there, would the vehicles in there for the day not serve the purpose of the boom gate? So, to be honest, the concept is redundant. It's either used for parking or it's not used for parking. If it's used for parking, if those vehicles are in there for a period of a day, there will be no traffic. So ultimately, if the boom gate were to be used, then it would be, if the idea is to preclude traffic, it should preclude all traffic. All cars should be there. This is something I'm not understanding. I don't believe it's been brought forward as intent by the surf club. I'm wondering if someone can, maybe the director could clear that up for me.
Director, do you understand that?
Yes, Your Worship, I can't tell how the certain side would intend to use that, whether they would have parking or no parking. As I said, my assumption would be if you're closing it off, the basis would be you would restrict cars because that's the risk that's been identified. So, but yeah, I'm not in a position to really understand how that would be intended to be used.
We're at the expense of going round and round, but Councillor Mackay?
Just would like to add to what Councillor Bella has said is that I feel that cars come in and out of that space, even just driving in, just to have a bit of a look at the beach. So that would be blocking off that as a risk for cars coming into that space. And also, yeah, that opportunity is there for the volunteers first up, and then, as said, closed off, and then that's it for that time. So if it was regulated.
We're speculating a lot here. Councillor May?
I was just going to suggest that we lay this on the table and arrange a meeting with the surf club to get a clear indication as to how they think this could operate. We can then have a look at the licensing process, if that becomes a part of this, and bring it back to the next council meeting.
Well, before you move the procedural motion, there's a couple of standout items here that have been identified in the discussions around the table. Number one, this is freehold land outside the lease of the Surf Life Saving Club. There's a precedent here for public car parking that we need to take into account. And also in the officer's recommendation, it is that the car park access be left unrestricted, but that we continue consultation with the IMEO Surf Life Saving Club on pedestrian and vehicle management to reduce the associated risk to pedestrians and vehicle interactions. So I think that's what we're actually saying. There is an open invitation within this recommendation being put to council that we continue this discussion with the IMEO Surf Life Saving Club. You've got to be wary of the fact that this is outside of the lease, this is public land, this is public access, and the precedent that we would set. And this is not a comment on the safety. There is a clear safety issue out there, and that's why we've actually got to continue this discussion with the Surf Life Saving Club, as Councillor Shetty has identified. So, Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are into debate on the motion, I take it?
No, we're not.
We're not. Okay, I'll wait until there's debate on the motion before I say something.
All right. So, would somebody like to move this recommendation?
I'll go back to I want to lay it on the table, Your Worship. I think while that part remains in the motion, that you have be restricted access and the boom gate not be installed, that is ruling out an option, and I think that we should consider all of the options before we make a decision.
Procedural motion is that lays on the table until all the options are considered in discussion with the Surf Life Saving Club. Those in favour? Those against? Okay, there's one against, Councillor Bella. That motion is carried. The procedural motion is carried by 10 to 1, and that will lay on the table until those discussions happen. Response to petition footpath on the Goldsmith Street, East Mackay. This is 11.5.3. Did I miss that one, did I? I missed one. Road hire up. 11.5.2, the response to petition provision of bus shelter in the Primavera Boulevard area. So this is quite a lengthy response as well, and the officer's recommendation that council noted, advice the petitioners no funding's been allocated, confirm the council is not considering, and representations will be made direct to Translink. We do have a presenter here. Margaret Old is the president of the Residents Committee at Eagle Mount Village. Margaret, where are you? Thank you very much. Once again, the rules of engagement, 3 minutes. It's not a two-way conversation, but 3 minutes to present your case to council. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. I'm a resident of Eagle Mount Village and President of the Residents Committee. The provision of a designated bus stop with shelter to service our residents has been an ongoing issue since the early 2000s when the first homes were built. We are an ageing population. Many of our residents do not have cars and are not on aged care packages which provide assisted transport, and the number is increasing. As the majority are pensioners, cost is always a factor, meaning that taxi fares are not an option, so the bus service is the only alternative. Doctor's appointments, hospital visits, visits to loved ones in aged care are some of the reasons why the bus service is vital. In order to do so, our elderly residents, some with mobility challenges, must wait in Primavera Boulevard opposite the entrance to the village to catch the bus, effectively a hail and ride. This involves standing in all weathers, stifling heat or pouring rain with no seat or shelter in sight. I ask, would you be prepared to do that, or have your elderly relative endure the same? The nearest bus stop without shelter is outside Beaconsfield School in Queen Street, a distance of just over 1 kilometre, some uphill, an impossible walk for an elderly person. We consider that asking for a service that many others take for granted is not unreasonable. Residents of Breezes walk about 100 metres from their village to a designated bus stop with shelter on Beaconsfield Road, while those living in Westminster Lodge are about 50 metres from their bus, and those in Cascade Gardens are just over 100 metres from the same bus stop in Oak Street adjacent to Woolies car park. Why can't we have the same, especially when I see several of these shelters sitting unused in locations not even on a designated bus route? I realise that this is explained by the fact that one of the conditions for development approval may include the provision of a bus stop. My understanding is that Miraflores Estate was developed just over 10 years ago. How many other developments done around this time were required to provide bus stops, and why then was this not a condition placed on the developers of Miraflores? As the main entrance to our village was relocated to Primavera Boulevard to coincide with this development, this would have been an ideal opportunity for council to make good on the previous promise of a bus stop for our village. We have been advised that council's priority is upgrading existing bus shelters to disability standards before providing any new ones. I certainly hope that funding which could be used to provide us with a bus shelter are not being used to upgrade the previously mentioned unused facilities. Some consider that as we live in a village, we are not ratepayers. I can assure you that this is not the case. Every one of us contributes via our monthly fees towards the rates paid by our village. As members of the Residents Committee, we have a duty of care to our fellow residents and sincerely hope that Council gives favourable consideration to our appeal for this service in order to make life a little safer for them all. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and one of our other residents, Mr. Barry.
Thanks, thank you very much. And we have a resident of Eagle Mount Village, Mr. Barry Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I was very brief. Margaret has said that whole lot in the box. I've been at Eagle Mount for 23 years. It's only in the last 2 years I've really started to use the bus because I'm losing my eyesight. And I can tell you where that bus stop is one we really need. It's not only the residents who are using this spot, the people in the houses in Primavera also are catching the bus at that location. So it's not just for the residents, it's also for the general public. And I only ask the council, wholeheartedly and sincerely, to give us the shelter we're asking for. To stand out there in that heat and on the rain when it was this morning is just something which we don't need. I travel a fair bit by bus now and I see all these shelters they're around and there's never a person in them. The buses never stop there. So there is chances for units to be relocated. Thank you very much for your time. And,
thanks, Mr. Smith. Well done. Thank you. All right, any questions, councillors? All right. Councillor Chu, you have a question?
I believe there's a foreshadow.
Well, we don't have a foreshadowed motion until we've got a motion to debate. Councillor Christensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed the report mentions that the costs of the bus shelter would be in the vicinity of $365,000. Given that shelters itself are much less costlier than that, could it please be outlined by the CEO or the director as to why the figure is $365,000?
Director.
Yep, through Your Worship. Obviously, you can see that the concept plan has been developed around that. It includes obviously creating an indentation for the bus to be able to pull off appropriately, plus appropriate shelters. It also incorporates an access way across from the retirement village to the shelter that's concerned, which would be lighted as well. So there's a number of additional costs with existing services and infrastructure below the ground that contribute to the significant cost. So as Councillor Christian indicated, it's not as simply just grabbing an existing shelter and moving it across and placing it on the ground.
Further questions? Councillor Christensen.
Thank you very much again, Your Worship. Just clarifying that these costs, this work that's been indicated that would lead to the $365,000 cost are absolutely necessary for the installation of a bus shelter according to, Australian and state standards.
Director.
Yeah, again, through Your Worship, I think as was indicated by the speakers, Council's previous commitment to bringing up existing stops to the appropriate standards. So there's been joint funding with the state government around making sure everything is DDA requirement. Again, so building any new infrastructure, that's a minimum standard you would need to obviously provide for that. We also think as part of that, obviously if you're doing that work, pedestrian access in the middle of the road would be warranted as well.
Final question, Your Worship.
Yep.
The final question that I have is, given that the indication is that this project might be $365,000 or thereabouts, what is the average annual spend that Mackay Regional Council has on bus shelters per annum?
Director, can we answer that?
Yes, certainly, Worship. We'll give an indication in the current LTFP Capital Forward program. So we have invested quite a bit on the upgrade of the existing shelters to meet DDA requirements. Current budget estimates in future years have between around 120 to 150,000 per year for the next 3 years, not excluding this year.
All right.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further questions? No further, Councillor May.
Just one, Your Worship. Where the plan is situated, is that currently where the bus is pulling over and picking up customers?
Director.
Yes, Your Worship. Yes, I understand it is where the whole ride situation is.
So further question, Your Worship. So I probably struggle to understand as to if that's acceptable now, as it is, and the residents are requesting just the bus shelter, why then do we need to be spending all of this money doing those other upgrades when it's acceptable now? Also request as far as the bus shelter.
I think it's the DDA requirements, but Director?
Yeah, through Your Worship. So you would still have to make sure there's DDA requirements around access and everything like that. So it's not as simple as being able to just put the shelter there. Once you put a shelter there, you're required to do it to the appropriate standards.
Councillor Sheedy.
Just seems that we're not sort of like comparing apples with apples, and I can see that the point that the director's made that those additional requirements sort of come with you can basically load up this against what's been requested, but and I guess that's a value judgment that our council needs to make at the end of the day.
Suggest it's a little bit more than a value judgment, Councillor. This is a judgment against the set criteria and DDR requirements for us to go and do something like this in the community. So
it is loading up the what's otherwise requested and might be simply well within our well, fairly minor work by comparison.
Councillor Mackay?
Can I just ask when this changed with the DDA requirements, like how long has that been in place for building of structures of bus shelters now? Because obviously it doesn't seem to have been that in the
It's
past.
not building a bus shelter.
The requirements
Access and
around
safety
the access of
requirements,
it, because there's a lot of bus shelters out there without this, but I'm just wondering when it came into effect.
Yeah, Councillor, we've certainly been designing our new shelters to DDA requirements for a number of years. So the previous funding I was talking about was historically shelters that had been established across the region for a period of time. That was where the funding was targeted to upgrade those. But yeah, certainly, I'd have to look at the exact date, but certainly last 5+ years we've certainly been building to the standards of DDA requirements.
So CEO, then, if we were just to put a bus shelter there, what's our exposure?
I don't think I think the point is to the director's point, as soon as you amend infrastructure, it must be amended to the current standard, no dissimilar to changing wiring in a house. You don't just change the wire, you need to bring it all up to standard. It's the same in this infrastructure component. If you're going to add an addition or amend the way it currently is, it must then be to standard, which is what creates the project cost.
Right. Further questions? We've got an officer's recommendation for the response to this petition before us. Would somebody like to move? Prepared to move that? Councillor Bella moves. Is there a seconder? I'll second it for the one overlaps. Councillor Bella?
I want to recognise that a bus shelter in this position is sorely needed. We have a priority list of projects that this council operates by. Part of our remit, the oath we took, is that we would faithfully and impartially fulfil the duties of office, which means we need to look at the wider picture and see whether this project, while it is of merit, great merit, is it of the most merit? Now that's part of what our priority system does, otherwise it becomes an absolute dog's breakfast. And I know for a fact there are any number of places, Serena and whatever, that would like a similar sort of thing. We've got a nursing home there. The other thing is, whether you like it or not, there are standards we must abide by. And you can squirm and you can writhe and you can complain, but it is the law. Access to shops and that sort of thing for people of disability. And I know with roads, nowadays, if we seal a road in a country area, we can't seal it the way we used to seal it, with just a narrow strip. It must be done to a standard. The road that is currently there suffices until such time as there is major work needs to be done. That major work is at massively more cost than the road that was there in the first place. So as I said, I acknowledge the merit of this, but we do have a priority system. It's been assessed against that. And if we take money from other things to do this, money which is not allocated, I would like each councillor to say where they want that money to come from. It's not just a matter of creating dollars, but we must do it to a standard. And as I said, all conversation we had about just plonking something there is totally redundant. You cannot do it nowadays. I've worked in aged care and in disability my entire life. It must be done to a standard.
Thanks, Councillor Bella. Speaker against. Councillor Jones speaking against.
Yes, Your Worship. I'll be voting against the officer's recommendation. For me, there is a reputational damage to council when a commitment from a local councillor 20 years ago is not followed through. This matter is also aligned with our corporate plan, and it sits under the community environment tab, where we say that we want a safe, healthy and engaged region, where our region is a safe and resilient community and with services that support high standards of public health, and we support each other through both good and challenging times. This is a challenging time for the elderly in our community. The petition is about a bus shelter for the current TransLink service 301 in Miraflora Estate. These residents stand there for lengths of time and get there early because they can't run for a bus like the younger generation. They have to get there early to make sure that they don't miss their bus. Some of the residents that use this bus stop use the public service to go to Serena to see their family. And others who have walking aids use it as a public service to visit nursing homes to see their loved ones. I note in the previous report last month there is a comment in relation to representation to TransLink for funding of a bus shelter at Royal Sands, and I guess it's to provide a shelter for the students. So why is it that Miraflora Estate, built 10 years ago and right next door to a retirement village, was not given the same consideration? I understand that there are budget implications, and in considering the wider community, it is likely that a project in the next 10 years of the LTFF will not go ahead, and as such, a priority given to this project could fill that gap. So I ask councillors to consider voting down this recommendation, as I have foreshadowed an alternate motion for your consideration. Thank you, Your Worship.
What is the alternate motion that you're foreshadowing, councillor?
It was distributed.
You don't have it there? Do we have it? It appears we've lost councillor Christensen.
Oh, yeah.
It is the council looks to prioritise.
Yes. What's the motion? It's justification.
Sent to
It's on the screen.
Well, that's not an alternate motion. The council looks to prioritise the project within future long-term financial plans.
and also to, it's not been added. There was one that earlier this morning that was sent to Worship.
I just certainly don't have that.
One that's on it as well.
Because, councillor, with respect, I mean, that's really, that's putting that off into the never never.
Well, it's, sorry, Worship, I'll stand. For me, I realise that we can't commit this year and next year. The problem with the letter that's been around for 20 years is that it never ever got listed on LTFF. So if this is listed on the LTFF, it has an opportunity at some point to be able to be funded, even if it ends up being funded just as a shelter in a shorter version. I don't know.
Okay.
And I did ask that that the point was that plus the TransLink, conversation occurs as well. So to try and get funding.
Okay, thanks, councillor. Councillor Miller, do you have a question on this?
Oh, no, I'd just like to, well, firstly, was Mackay Regional Council in existence 20 years ago?
The city was.
As I said.
That would have been the pioneer in those days.
So what I'm saying is, what relevance does a letter 20 years ago by someone whom we don't know, by an entity that is not this entity, how does that stand as a justification? Could I have some clarity on that?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we can't take a letter that some councillor said 20 years ago as part of this justification, but the alternate motion is that council looks to prioritise the project within future long-term financial plans. Let's not get into a debate about any justification. That is the alternate motion. Was there anything further that you wanted?
There was, Your Worship, but I'm just having trouble trying to find it. I have asked if we could put the TransLink part, so the part of the actual original motion.
Do we have that? Does anybody have that?
It's here it is here, Your Worship. It's that the representation be made to TransLink for site-specific funding for this location, given its presence on the public network, and I also ask that the principal petitioner be advised of these outcomes.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay, so I'm happy to add that, but I've not seen it before, but I'm happy to add that. So, Councillor Bella, you've got a question?
My question is, while, and again, I accept the merits of the concept, however, if this alternate goes ahead, prioritise the project within the long-term financial forecast plan, does that mean that other issues that are just as pressing at other nursing homes or whatever automatically go step down the queue. So, and in actual fact, because this is prioritised, if we have a similar situation, I have a couple of smaller ones, but that is of greater need, does that take second place to this one? Or are we going to assess things via an objective framework where everything is assessed by its merits? This here flies in the face of objective assessment. So my question is, basically, as I suggested, like what I suggest, is that correct? Would it mean that our objective assessment is circumvented in the case of this particular case?
Well, CEO, I mean, if this alternate motion gets up that the council looks to prioritise the project within future long-term financial plans, obviously there's going to be something that drops out.
The long-term financial plan is a 10-year document that we look to. Everything would be assessed and prioritised in that previous year, just before we talk about the budget. So this would see something be discussed in any year for the next 10, potentially. But everything would have to be adjusted and prioritised on its own merits at each financial year by whomever that council might be in the lead up to that budget. So if we use this year's capital plan as an example, we've had conversations and briefings shortly after elections about here is what this next year looks like. That all derives from the 10-year plan. When we look at what our 10-year plan is, our 10-year plan currently is not achievable. We'll never deliver that every year in, year out because it's such a big list, which means prioritisation needs to occur each year to decide what does or doesn't go ahead and follow.
That's pretty self-explanatory. So Katrina, could I have that alternative motion actually outlined? So what was the second line?
The second line was the representation be made to direct.
And that representation. That's the original motion.
Yeah, you can cut and paste out the original.
You'd have to, yeah, okay, don't worry about it, as long as we know. Okay, Councillor May?
Just a question, Mr Mayor, like this is becoming bigger than Van Her. None of us that sit around this table know what's on that priority list. I'm thinking that this needs an assessment, that we have a look at the priority list, see what bus shelters have been earmarked for construction over the next period of time, because I for one don't know what that is, and it's getting out of the realms of having enough information to make the best decision there.
So?
Well, in saying that, and I'm not one for laying things on the table, but I think it does need to be laid on the table. There is way too much confusion around what is actually happening here.
Well, certainly the $150,000 a year for bus shelters, that's not a lot of bus shelters, so, and that's what our LTFF provides for. Happy to take a procedural motion.
Yep, I'll move that we lay it on
Those on
the
the
table.
table pending further information, those in favour? Any against? Councillor Bauer, are you against?
Yes.
Councillor Christensen, are you against or for? Can't hear you.
For laying it on the table.
For laying it on the table, okay. And sorry, Councillor Bella, did you say you're for laying it on the table?
No, I think at some point we've got to start making some decisions.
Right, so there's one against, 10 for. So 10-1, lay on the table pending further information. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the regional waste management plans. Have you? We'll go another one. Goldsmith Street, right. There's two here to get past the petitions. 11.5.3, a petition for a footpath on Goldsmith Street. Okay, and so the recommendation here is that the council notes the outcomes of the review, confirms that the requested pathway on Goldsmith Street is not a current priority, but will be considered for funding as part of the future capital program. And further, that the principal petitioner be advised. Questions? Are there no questions? Would somebody like to move? Councillor Jones moves. Seconded by Councillor Hassett. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Worship. Any footpath that fills a gap and creates a linkage in our footpath network is certainly a benefit to our community. So I'm in favour of the officer's recommendation based on the fact that while it's not a current priority, it will be considered for future funding in part of the future capital works project. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put that motion then. Those in favour? Any against? This motion's carried unanimously. That was easy. Thank you. All right, now let's move on. 11.5.4, the Regional Waste Management Plan. So this is a very comprehensive report, councillors, and it's been a fair while getting to us. It's great to have this Regional Waste Management Plan up for our adoption today. Director, is there anything further that you need to add here?
Just Your Worship, I think, this is a state-led initiative looking at regions for collaboration. It's fair to say it's been ongoing for a period of time. Probably some updated data needs to be looked at in relation to that. And there's probably a number of further investigations that need to get into that around whether FOGO is beneficial for our region, what's the risk around that, waste to energy. So we see this as an opportunity to receive the report, then to start accessing the state government funding to actually get into the details of what our region needs to look at in relation to waste going in the future.
Thank you. And as the Director said, both the Isaacs Regional Council and the Whitsunday Regional Council are very keen to actually start this dialogue with the state, particularly around areas like FOGO. Brisbane City Council has just canned their FOGO trial for the last 2 years. And so this is very pertinent for us to start discussing this, because waste is going to be one of the biggest impacts in terms of our costs over the next decade. Councillor Bell, you got a question?
No, I was going to move it.
Right, you want to move it? Councillor Bella moves. If there's no questions, Councillor Bella moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Councillor Bella.
It must be remembered this is the Regional Waste Management Plan, which is Mackay, Whitsunday and Isaacs. Whitsunday and Isaacs face different cost drivers that we do, and those cost drivers are going to get greater for us year on for quite a period of time. There's no doubt at all that there is a big push to divert material from landfill. We've had a couple of discussions in the newly formed, informal discussions, newly formed Infrastructure Strategic Committee regarding this. There's no silver bullet with this. We're expected to get to 80% diversion. What we've already done, which is extremely admirable, has actually put us behind the 8 ball, because that has not been considered in our overall achievement. So having private enterprise take a certain amount of waste, that is not considered in our achievements. FOGO, look, I think sometimes there's these lovely things, these lovely oases that really they're mirages. FOGO, I believe, in my reading of this and with experiences in other councils, is a bit like that. It would only make a very small change to our performance with a very large increase in cost. It wouldn't even get us close. The one plus side is we're about to embark on our own waste strategy. I think these things, this will inform us up until that point. This is very handy, but our own waste strategy is something that we need to look seriously at. There is also the problem with a lot of our recycling. What do we do with the stuff? Glass, that's been reduced a little bit by our container return scheme, but glass, very difficult to get rid of. Cardboard, very difficult to get rid of. All of those things, it's going to become harder and harder. And what we've got to do, and what I asked in our briefing upstairs in the SAC committee, was pretty much said, where are we going to be in 10, 15, 20 years? And I think a lot of these little things like FOGO are the divergences from the path that'll end up being very costly cul-de-sacs that we'll have to reverse out of. And I think this is something, and for months we hear the old, it should be cheaper to dump, it should be cheaper to dump. I will highlight it's going to get more and more expensive. And that is not driven by us, that is driven by state, federal, and indeed right across the first world.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bell. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Hassan speaking for.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I concur with everything that Councillor Bella has just said, but also wanted to just remind councillors that we are just accepting and noting the report. That does not commit us to implementing the recommendations that are in that report. It merely gives us the opportunity to then proceed to, as the Director said, apply for funding to further investigate the implementation of this report. The cost outlined in there, $72 million to implement this across the region, is absolutely significant, and there is no guarantee that that's going to be funded by the state. So there is significant data that needs to be considered in this. There have been FOGO trials, as Councillor Bella referred to, in other regions that need to be taken into account. So I absolutely support the officer's recommendations, but that we proceed with caution.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No other speakers? Okay, well, I certainly commend this report to you. It enables us to start the regional discussion and then make sure that we're on the front foot in terms of funding in what's going to be a very expensive exercise for us and future councils. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.5.5, the new lease of the Walkerston Cricket Club and Mackay Cycling Club Incorporated. Is there anything further to this one? Who's this come under? Is this Jason? Are you again?
Yes.
Correct. Thank you.
It's a pretty straightforward one, Your Worships. BMX used to be part of that. They've now relocated out, so we're just wanting the two bodies that currently operate from that facility.
Questions? Any further questions on that one? Okay, would somebody like to move then that we adopt as per the officer's recommendation? Councillor Jones moves, seconded by Councillor Sheedy. Councillor Jones.
I'm happy with the new lease, Your Worship.
Okay. Any further speakers? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. We've got a quote to deal with, quote number 47 for the Patchett Waste Facility grab arm. Are there any questions around this? Okay, Councillor May.
Well, just I suppose a question in regards to why isn't the maintenance carried out, and where's our checks and balances to ensure that the capital equipment is being looked after in the proper manner?
Hey, Director.
Yeah, through Your Worship, that's a very good question, Councillor. That's part of why we've had to bring in specialists to have a look at some of the condition of the existing asset, because we can't get good maintenance records to show that. So that's part of the discussions we're having with the operator about where that responsibility sits. We see that the specialist comes in and will be able to provide us with some support in a position in relation to where adequate maintenance was carried out. But we do take on that there should be provisions under the terms of the contract that we're obviously regularly checking with the contractor to make sure the appropriate maintenance activities are being performed.
So anything further? Okay, Councillor. Further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Hassan, seconded by Councillor Corrill. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, Worship. Very briefly, as we said, what the Director's just referred to and Councillor May has raised, it's ensuring that these kind of mechanical pieces of equipment are maintained in the future. Obviously, this is a very specialised piece of equipment, so it makes sense to go with the preferred
Thank you. Speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried unanimously. The Strategic Financial Report for June 2024 under Corporate Services. And once again, it's a fairly lengthy but straightforward report. Acting Director, is there anything further that you'd like to present on this?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Whilst during the year, MRC forecast an operating deficit of $5.4 million for the year, ended 30th of June 2024, a number of factors have occurred post that date which have adjusted that figure. The biggest single item was the $4.7 million related to the timing of the federal assistance grant. It was budgeted to occur before the 30th of June, but actually occurred as payment on the 2nd of July. Unfortunately, as untied funding, we don't have the option to put that back into the current year. So whilst it's unfortunate, it is simply a timing matter. From a capital perspective, at this point of reporting, there's been a spend of $102.6 million, including operational costs, and just over $98 million pure capital expenditure. Just as a comment, whilst every effort's been made to bring forward all necessary items, there will be some adjustments that occur between now and audit in relation to provisions and CPI applications. And just as a summary, overall council is in a sound financial position. All the surpluses, all of the ratios, excepting the operating surplus ratio, are positive, and they are indicated in the report. So otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for the acting director? No questions. Councillor Johnson.
So just to clarify with the accounting treatment for this grant, will we be in a surplus for the 24-25 budget?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had that discussion. So, CEO?
I think that it'll be for a future discussion around budget review, but there's a couple of options available to us. One being the fact that in this financial year we had budgeted the federal assistant grant anyway, so whether we just take that as that. But the danger, of course, is the federal government may choose this year to pay us on time. Which would essentially give us the money twice in this year. They could indeed be late again. So it's really about what way we want to cut it, but we're never going to have surety because it seems that they just pay it whenever they feel like it as opposed to a fixed date.
I think rather than placing all the blame on the federal government, it's the state government. This money goes via. There are other states in Australia who got payment at the end of June, the last couple of days of the week of the end of June, and transferred their money to their state local governments immediately. Our state government elected not to do that until the start of the new financial year. So it's not all the federal government's issue, but the CEO's right. I mean, we're either going to have a huge problem in terms of surplus next year, or we will discuss that when we come to our budget formation periods at the start of the end of this year.
Sorry, Mayor. I was going to, in terms of how we'll treat it though, I believe we're not going to recognise this year so that we won't be carrying a 4.5 million surplus each budget review. You'll actually see just a normalisation of the figures. Where it will become a problem is if by the end of 30 June they advance pay us, we'll finish the year in a surplus, but we won't be continuing throughout the year with a surplus. So you won't be seeing.
Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the CEO, apart from obviously acknowledgement of this and financial reports and the report today and our annual report and so on, what practical difference, if any, is this sort of discrepancy going to make to council's financial situation and situation with the state government and borrowing facilities?
Thanks, Councillor. From a cash perspective, it's non-cash value to us, so it actually doesn't impact us in any way at all. It's just an accounting treatment in the background. Our other metrics remain on track above where they need to be, with the exception of the operating surplus, which is on track to be coming into place next year. But as this is just sort of, it works the same way as depreciation, if you will. So it sort of all sits in the background. It's non-cash money.
And in terms of our ability for borrowing, Councillor, that makes no
Yes.
impact on our ability to borrow.
No impact. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor May.
Just in pushing aside the federal assistance grants and the impact that has, my concern lies around the $5.3 million increase that there is in the employee benefits and the materials and services area, as opposed to what was being forecast at 30 June when we brought down our budget. So I'm struggling to understand why that figure has now exploded to, quite a significant amount in the figures, the actual figures.
Okay, Acting Director.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'm happy to answer that. So the majority of the employee benefits was in relation to changes for leave provisions. So in simple terms, when leave isn't taken, it is forward projected, and that's a CPI sort of index. That's a symptom of staff you're not taking the leave that we would have otherwise scheduled. It's one of the major items. We also have a number of issues with staff leaving and needing to pay out entitlements, and when they leave, we have to pay that. So they were not seen in the last couple of months, and just even in relation to other provisions. As far as materials and services are concerned, it's probably come exactly where we thought it was going to be at the last, not necessarily quarterly review, but the last conversation and projections that we gave to the council. In actual fact, overall, if you look at the items that are making up the current deficit, they're made up wholly of the federal assistance grant, which is a cash item at the time. But also then, as the CEO mentioned, the non-cash items of depreciation and the landfill remediation provision, which we knew about previously. Otherwise, there's actually overs and unders in relation to goods and services which are offset with wages and salary, and also then we had a benefit or bonus. We're able to recognise order income when it came in directly.
Further questions? No further questions? Would somebody like to move then that the strategic financial report for June 2024 be received? Councillor Hassan moves, seconded by Councillor Patton. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, Worship. I think most of the information has been covered and acknowledging what the Acting Director has said. I think overall for me that while we're coming in at a significantly higher deficit than what we originally anticipated, it's important to note that those accounting ratios are still in a very healthy position, and our financial stability is averaged over a period of time. So overall, it's in a very healthy financial position, and going forward, as we've said, this year our issue is going to be having maybe a surplus, so very happy to move that.
Thank you very much. Speaker against? Are there any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put that motion, and those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, there's no petitions to receive, no tenders, no consideration of notified motions. There's nobody registered for public attendance. That's any late business. There's been no registration of late business. We've got 3 confidential reports to be voted. Does anybody think we need to go into? You do? Okay, so Councillor May, would you like to move that meeting be closed to public attendance so we can do these? Seconded by, we don't need a seconder, that's a procedural motion. Those in favour? Any against? You're in favour, Councillor Christensen? Okay, right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, back online. Okay. Confidential reports to be adopted. 17.1 approved sponsorship under the Invest Mackay Events and Conference Attraction Program for June 2024. Somebody like to move? It's moved by Councillor Hassan, seconded by Councillor Mackay. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Disposal of council land at 30 Gordon Street, Mackay. Would somebody like to move? Councillor May moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Those in favour? Those against? 3 against. Okay, thank you. The motion is carried. So 8.3, did you get all that, Katrina? You got it? Yes. Fantastic. Okay, so approved concessions at 17.3, approved concessions under the facilitating development of the Mackay Region Policy for June 2024. Would somebody like to move? Councillor May moves, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Well, thank you, councillors. That concludes the meeting today. Thank you for your debate, and thank you, CEO and officers. Declare the meeting closed. And have a good sleep, Councillor Christensen.
I'll try to, Your Worship. Thank you.